When someone talks about a dinosaur with no teeth, your mind probably goes straight to a sauropod like a Brachiosaurus or an Argentinosaurus. However, there was also a small group of theropod dinosaurs that evolved to lose their teeth multiple times throughout the Cretaceous. And today we are going to be talking about one of these animals, but this one happens to be new. Hi, and welcome to my channel where I talk about all things dinosaurs. Today, I have some fun news to share with you guys. There has been a new species of toothless therapsid dinosaur described from the Cretaceous of Brazil, and it's such a unique animal that I just had to make a video about it. The new animal is named Berthasaura leopoldinae, and we can start off with the name explanation. Berthasaura is named after Bertha, the German engineering apprentice who dreams of becoming a paleontologist in the children's book series Dinotopia by James Gurney. This is actually a cool reference since this animal was found in the same country as many of the dinosaurs featured in Dinotopia. And the species is named in honor of the Brazilian paleontologist Maria Leopoldina. And for those of you who don't know, Leopoldina was a pioneering figure in Brazilian geology and paleontology. She received her PhD in geology from the University of Berlin and became the first woman to lead a paleontological collection in Brazil. So she is definitely someone worth honoring here. So now that we got the name out of the way, let's talk about what kind of dinosaur Bertha was. As I mentioned in the intro, Berthasaura was a theropod dinosaur. But if you're familiar with theropoda, then you're probably imagining something like a velociraptor or maybe a Tyrannosaurus rex. But both of those dinosaurs belong to a group called Coelurosauria, which means they're relatively modern-looking theropods. Therapists as a whole are more closely related to sauropods than they are to coelurids. Sauropods are the long-necked plant eaters, and while they do include the famous Argentinosaurus, it also includes other groups like the ornithomimids, which were ostrich-like dinosaurs. And it also includes our new friend Berthasaura. Berthasaura is actually closely related to another group of dinosaurs called the Ceratosaurs, which were small theropods that lived in the southern continents during the Cretaceous period. Now, when I say small, I mean like 2 to 3 meters long, so still pretty intimidating. The most famous ceratosaur is probably Ceratosaurus itself, which has a very distinctive nasal horn. But like I said, this group was pretty widespread during the Cretaceous, and there were lots of different kinds of ceratosaurids living all over the place. These dinosaurs were mostly certosauromorphs, meaning they had relatively short snouts, small heads, and relatively short arms. These features evolved multiple times in the ceratosaur lineage, even in species that were closely related to birds, but not quite birds yet. For example, the famous feathered dinosaur Utah raptor, or honestly, any feathered dinosaur that's not a bird is a ceratosaur. Despite their somewhat intimidating appearance, all ceratosaurids were most likely either omnivores or herbivores. There was no major predatory ceratosaur, but if they did eat meat, it would have only been very small amounts. See, Berthasaura is part of a clade called the Noasauridae. This group first appeared in the Middle Jurassic of South America and lasted all the way until the end of the Cretaceous. The oldest known member of the family is Noasaura, the horned one. The weird thing about Noasaura is that while its head looks fairly normal for a theropod, its skull was completely toothless. This trait then evolved again in the later members of the Noasauridae, including Berthasaura. This loss of teeth is really strange for a theropod, especially since they're generally considered to be descendants of much older, more primitive theropods that had teeth. The reason for losing their teeth may have been related to diet. Noasaurids were mostly herbivorous, and grinding their food was more important than catching prey. However, tooth loss is usually a rare evolutionary event. So the fact that several different noasaurids lost their teeth multiple times suggests that this was a key adaptation for evolving into this ecological role. Now, as far as how these animals adapted to life without teeth, we can look to their close relative, the abelisaurids, for clues. Abelisaurids also evolved from toothed ancestors, but they lost their teeth multiple times. They had strong, robust skulls that were filled with a thick layer of connective tissue. This tissue acted like a thick layer of skin that would protect their mouth while they were consuming plants. In addition, abelisaurids had strong jaw muscles and sharp, bony ridges instead of teeth. With a combination of powerful jaws, strong skulls, and horny ridges, these dinosaurs were well equipped for crushing and grinding vegetation. I think that Berthasaura probably did the same thing. However, the skull of Berthasaura was more delicate than other noosaurids, so it could have been more susceptible to injury. But this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. You see, Berthasaura was only around 2.3 meters long. It was roughly the size of a German shepherd dog and weighed about 70 kilograms. Berthasaura lived in what is now southern Brazil during the late Cretaceous. This was an ancient rift setting that was full of volcanoes, so I'm sure Berthasaura's life wasn't too stressful. This small body size may have helped Berthasaura avoid predators and allowed them to exploit a new niche. You see, while larger noosaurids were generally more robust and had thicker skulls, the smaller ones were more gracile and had thinner skulls. Berthasaura had a thinner skull than other Noosauridae, but it was still thicker than its closest relatives, the abelisaurids. The researchers believe that Berthasaura was most likely an omnivore, but it was still more closely related to herbivorous noosaurids than to the abelisaurid clade, which were all carnivorous. It lived alongside other noosaurids, but they were generally larger than Berthasaura was. So Berthasaura was most likely filling a unique role in the ecosystem. This new discovery is exciting because it helps us understand how and why evolution works. The repeated evolution of toothlessness in noosaurids shows us that there can be multiple pathways to the same evolutionary outcome. Teeth are generally good for catching and tearing up prey, but they can also be advantageous for grinding vegetation. So, seeing how the Noosauridae evolved in different ways to become more and more herbivorous but still retained their theropod lifestyles is really neat. And this new species of toothless dinosaur helps add to the story. In conclusion, Berthasaura is a tiny, weird-looking dinosaur that lived in Brazil during the Cretaceous. It was closely related to the horned dinosaurs and was most likely an omnivore. Its most notable feature was its lack of teeth, which is strange for a theropod, but it was also a really neat adaptation for adapting to a new environment. Thanks to the research community, we have learned so much about dinosaurs, and we will continue to learn more about them for years to come. If you like what I do, you can support me on a crowdfunding platform. The link is provided below. As always, I want to thank everyone who has supported me. You guys are the best, and I couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.